OB/GYN ward. 3 women were in labor at the exact same time, but one was facing a severe, high-risk, premature delivery. Naturally, her situation was the most urgent, and she was rushed straight into the delivery room. The expectant mother's face was deadly pale, drenched in cold sweat. Pain and agony filled her eyes, yet she didn't make a single sound. She needed to stay calm. She couldn't afford to distract the doctors right now. They were her only hope. Premature birth, umbilical cord wrapped around the neck, the lead physician ordered sharply. The fetus swallowed amniotic fluid contaminated with fetal waste. There's a serious risk of asphyxiation. And the mother is hemorrhaging heavily. Go. Get the secondary consent forms ready for her signature immediately. The surgical assistant scrambled out and returned a moment later. Ma'am, is there no one here with you? Are you all by yourself? The assistant shouted into the hallway again, but not a single soul claimed to know her. Because she was under local anesthesia, her mind was completely sharp. Only the lower half of her body was numb. Save my babies. Please save them. She didn't have the breath to answer questions. All she cared about was bringing her children safely into this world. Her voice came out raspy, completely ruined. Don't worry, we're doing everything we can. Sign here, please. The mother lifted her head with great effort. Her face was so pale it was almost translucent, forming a horrifying contrast with her lips, which she had bitten raw. She raised her trembling hand and signed her name line by line. 3 months later, Lindale County, the Grand Riverside Hotel. A long, clean finger tapped lightly against the tabletop. Knock. A sudden weight fell over the room. Reggie, the local station manager, quickly chimed in. Mr. Ethan, sir, please, go on. First, your marketing proposal is garbage, Ethan said smoothly. Second, the ad buy I placed with your station was supposed to air during prime time. 10 o'clock is unacceptable. Third, he paused, turning his head. That slight movement revealed the sharp, uncompromising line of his jawline. We're business partners, Reggie. I'm not here to cut your throat. There's no need to look so terrified. Reggie offered a weak, awkward smile, equal parts embarrassed and subservient. Understood, Mr. Ethan. He stealthily wiped the sweat from his palms, cursing inwardly. The hell am I so scared of him for? I'm a department manager at the local TV network. Right. Ethan pulled back his gaze, stood up, and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window. His dark pupils reflected the vibrant city lights flickering to life outside. His thin lips were pressed into a tight line. Something crossed his mind, causing a crease between his brows that just as quickly smoothed out. Then, a shockingly callous question slipped past his lips. Reggie. Yes, sir. Reggie thought one thing, but his face wore an obsequious grin as he hurried forward. Mr. Ethan, what can I do for you? Does your company offer any special accommodations? Reggie blinked, not quite following. Excuse me, what was that? Ethan turned around, loosened his tie slightly, and gave him a sweeping glance. Are you thick? Loosening the tie, that means he's hot under the collar and needs to blow off some steam. Got it, got it. Reggie scrambled to assure him. If throwing a woman at the guy meant getting the advertising deal signed without changing a single clause, it was a no-brainer. Before Ethan could speak again, Reggie added, Don't you worry, sir. I'll arrange it personally. I guarantee you'll be more than satisfied. Ethan towered over him, his gaze cool and condescending. Turning back to look into the distant night, he murmured, Find someone who hasn't been on the job long. Her voice doesn't need to be pretty, and her temper doesn't need to be sweet. But make sure you hold her leverage, someone easy to control. Reggie stared at him as if he were looking at a ghost. Jesus, the sheer nerve of this guy. Ethan turned his head, casting a cold sideways glance. Reggie instantly snapped to attention. I'll handle it right away. We have just the person at the station. She fits every single one of your requirements. #### Chapter 2, A Calculated Reunion. The hospital. 100 days. That's how long her baby girl had been lying in the incubator. Looking through the thick pane of glass at the tiny creature, barely the length of her forearm, with oxygen tubes hooked up to her little nose, Audrey felt an unbearable ache in her chest. When her phone rang, she was trying to get her ragged breathing under control. "Hello," she rasped. Her voice sounded so horrific that the person on the other end immediately swore. Jesus Christ, that voice. "I fucking hate calling you." Audrey didn't reply. She didn't care about the verbal abuse. Her eyes were glued to her baby. She thought she saw a flutter of movement, as if the child was waking up. "Get over to the Grand Riverside," her boss snapped. "You're meeting a client. If you close this deal, I'll give you a raise." A raise was her ultimate weakness. She was desperately in need of money. Inside the incubator, the baby woke up. Audrey involuntarily took a step forward, her breathing shallow and fast. "My baby, you've got 30 minutes. Move it." The line went dead with a series of quick beeps. The noise snapped her back to reality. Money, her child. How was she supposed to choose? Without money, without a job, how was she supposed to save her daughter? She hesitated on the spot for a single second, then turned on her heel and left. Barely 30 seconds after she walked away, the frail, impossibly tiny baby burst into a fit of hysterical crying. Her flailing little arms knocked the oxygen tube out of place. It was 9 o'clock at night, and there wasn't a single nurse in sight. Audrey arrived at the hotel and followed the instructions to the suite. Reggie, her manager, opened the door for her. She took one step inside, and the door clicked shut behind her. Turning around, she was met with a solid slab of wood and her own reflection in the glossy finish. Understanding hit her like a physical blow. She knew what tonight was. A corporate setup. She had never been subjected to workplace casting couches before. She just hadn't expected that after missing out on it during her golden years, she'd run right into it now that her life was in shambles. Clink. Behind her came the sharp sound of a glass hitting the tabletop, heavy with an underlying edge of authority. Startled, she turned around. She was 29 years old and undeniably stunning. Ever since she received her first love letter in 6th grade, suitors had been a constant in her life. She had received countlessly passionate confessions, but there was only one man she had ever pursued herself. She had loved him with everything she had, every shred of her soul, her entire life. And what he had given her in return was equally generous. Endless nights of chaotic passion, the weight of his presence lingering inside her, and the bitter storm he had personally unleashed upon her life. Ethan. Under the dim, dappled light, his features grew increasingly clear. He looked exactly as he did in her memory. The white dress shirt clung to his muscular frame, tracing the clear line down to his waist. A black tie sat neatly tucked beneath his collar. His posture was relaxed, exuding an air of effortless, aloof charm. Yet, his buzz cut gave him an unmistakable, raw arrogance that cut right through that polished exterior. He was magnetic, dangerous, and entirely unbothered by the world. He appraised her from head to toe. In the shadowed room, his gaze felt like a blade slicing down from the top of her head to the soles of her feet, razor sharp. Within seconds, Audrey's palms were slick with sweat. The silence stretched on like a tense tug-of-war. Whoever lost their composure first lost the game. He sat there completely composed, while she was already a nervous wreck. Seeing him here had caught her entirely off guard. A full minute passed before he finally spoke. "If I were you, I would have run somewhere so remote that no one recognized me, a place where even the most powerful man couldn't track me down. You really love doing things the hard way, don't you, Audrey?" His voice was like cold water dripping onto stone, cool, distinct, and echoing in the silence. This man, he never spared her feelings when he spoke. "Well, with all your unmatched power, didn't it still take you a whole year to find me?" She gave a hollow laugh, laced with faint mockery. Her voice sounded like a dying crow. She usually avoided talking at night for fear of terrifying anyone who listened. He let out a short chuckle in response, a sound like a knife scraping past an ear, quick and lethal. It was as if he were saying, "Let me show you what a real cold laugh sounds like. The only reason it took a year to find you is because I didn't care enough to look." In that cold snort, she felt the sheer absurdity of her own arrogance. Fine then. She was willing to earn money from anyone except him. If she had known it was Ethan, she never would have come. She turned to leave. Hold it. The command wasn't loud, but it carried an undeniable authority. She froze. A tall shadow stretched over her from behind, creeping from her legs all the way over her head, enveloping her completely. A scent invaded her nostrils, one she desperately wanted to run from, yet one that had haunted her dreams for years. I'll give you this contract in exchange for one night. Amidst this degrading tug-of-war, she somehow found her voice. I don't sell my body. You actually think I'd bother buying it? Reality slapped her awake in an instant. Of course he wouldn't. He wouldn't have in the past, and he certainly wouldn't now. Because he was married, with a beautiful wife waiting at home. #### Chapter 3. Pain on repeat. The year she first met Ethan, she was 19, a sophomore in college. A mugger had yanked her purse, and Ethan had caught the guys, beating them to a pulp right in front of her. Back then, the fists he threw felt like soft cotton pressing against her chest, and the stray locks of hair falling over his forehead as he swung were like a little boat drifting across the lake of her heart. Drifting, all the way to the present day, forever branded into her soul. And every now and then, it would creep back out, poking at her, making her bleed all over again. Inside the SUV, Audrey had no idea where Ethan was taking her. Her only thought was getting this night over with as quickly as possible. She didn't want to put up a futile resistance. There was no point wasting the time or energy. Since he had tracked her down, since he had cornered her and used a business deal as leverage, he was going to get whatever he wanted regardless. The back of the executive SUV was spacious, but his presence filled every inch of it. A casual glance to her side revealed his long legs, clad in tailored suit pants, resting near polished leather shoes that practically radiated a cold, distant air. She quietly pulled her eyes away. Over the years, he really hadn't changed much toward her. It had always moved in a relentless cycle, from annoyance to cold indifference, to dominant taking and back to annoyance again. Summer was just starting. Ever since giving birth, she had become miserably sensitive to the cold. The air conditioning in the vehicle was a bit too chilly, raising a layer of fine goosebumps along her arms. She had brought nothing with her except her purse. She shrank deeper into her corner, burying herself in the soft leather seat. She closed her eyes. No matter how large the vehicle was, it was still an enclosed space. He was right beside her, his distinct scent drifting into her nose thread by thread, pulling up memories scene after scene, bringing with them a rush of sharp, cutting pain. Half an hour later, a phone rang. Talk, the man barked, a single syllable. Mr. Ethan, sir, Reggie's voice squeaked over the speaker. Ethan's eyes were dark as night. Calling me at this hour, are you trying to ruin my night? No, absolutely not. I just wanted to drop a quick word, sir. Please go easy on her, don't force her into anything. That woman has a strange streak. Sometimes she's obedient, but other times she can be a real headache. If she decides to make a fuss later, I'm afraid it might get messy. Reggie hadn't made the call to speak up for Audrey. He was just trying to keep his own hands clean so he wouldn't lose his job. Ethan narrowed his eyes slightly, a sharp glimmer leaking from beneath his half-lidded gaze. Where's the fun if I don't force her? He hung up and tossed the phone casually onto the seat. Lifting his eyes, he caught her reflection in the rearview mirror. She was curled up in the corner like a dying flower quietly resting, exuding an intoxicated, fragile vulnerability. A minute passed. Ethan spoke abruptly. What the hell are you doing? The driver was so terrified he didn't dare speak. Who knew what the young master was looking at? He had called out to him several times with no answer. It's raining ahead, sir. The temperature outside is dropping, so I was going to ask if you wanted the AC turned off. No. Speed up. A sharp command. His tone plummeted several degrees colder. He leaned his head back against the headrest and closed his eyes. His lips pressed into a tight line, his jaw clenched tight. It had been a very long time since Audrey had enjoyed a decent night's sleep. Between the labor, the premature birth, and the severe complications, she had teetered on the brink of death, lying in the ICU for 10 full days. Those 10 days of unconsciousness had been the most peaceful time she had known in months. Now, she had fallen asleep in his vehicle. By the time she woke up, the engine was off and he was gone. Outside, a fine drizzle was falling, droplets dissolving into the pale mist like a dreary watercolor painting. "Ma'am, Mr. Ethan asks that you step outside," the driver said, holding the door open for her. Audrey stepped out of the vehicle. Even with the rain, it was much warmer outside than inside the air-conditioned cabin. She took a few steps forward before realizing where she was. A cemetery. A cemetery. A sudden tremor ran through her entire body. Escape was a luxury she should never have entertained. Someone would always drag you out into the open, forcing you to face your past, your history. As if anyone ever cared about the damage that history left behind. No one did. Chapter 4. Crumbling in an instant. Audrey walked inside. From a distance, she could see his tall, broad-shouldered frame standing straight in the veil of rain. Under the faint light and gray mist, with the rain falling softly around him, the scenery looked like a painting, and he was the master stroke at its center. Ethan was a legend in Northport. His wealth, his looks, and his family background paled in comparison to the innate aura he radiated, a natural, unteachable presence that belonged to him alone. "Get over here. Kneel." His voice drifted through the curtain of rain. Audrey walked up and stood behind him, her eyes naturally falling onto the tombstone. Even through the rain, she could make out the beauty of the woman in the photograph. Gentle, elegant. Monique. She was the rival standing between her and Ethan, the one she could never overcome, the soft spot in Ethan's heart, his first love. Dead. She had died last year because of Audrey, perished in a roaring fire. That very fire had taken Monique's life, destroyed Audrey's vocal cords, ruined her career as a radio host, and shattered her love story once and for all. Today was the 1-year anniversary of Monique's death. Her hesitation snapped his patience. He turned around. The rain had soaked his face, and beneath his wet lashes, his eyes burned a fierce, bloodshot red. "Did you hear me?" The roar came straight from his chest, sounding like a wounded beast. He was always like this. In front of Monique, he had zero self-control. Monique had died for her. Kneeling was the least she could do. Without a word, Audrey sank to her knees. When the flames were about to swallow her whole, Monique had thrown herself over Audrey, shielding her from the worst of it. Audrey had escaped without a scratch, but Monique couldn't be saved. Watch her. If she doesn't kneel here the entire night, she doesn't leave. Audrey closed her eyes as she heard his voice fade away. Ethan should hate her. He had every right to. The rain grew heavier. Her health had taken a massive turn for the worse. She couldn't even endure a little rain anymore. Within half an hour, she was shivering violently from the cold. Yet Monique's photograph maintained that warm, sweet smile. She had always been that kind of person, using her soft, gentle voice to call out Ethan, Ethan, again and again. Who could resist that kind of tenderness? Monique didn't have to do a thing to make Ethan cater to her hand and foot. In that burning building, as she threw herself over Audrey, Monique had sobbed, "Leave Ethan. I love him. I want to be with him. I've suppressed it for years, and I can't do it anymore. Audrey, I'll take this disaster for you, as long as you leave him. Just leave him on your own." Those words echoed in her ears, sending a violent, unstoppable tremor through her heart. A year's worth of accumulated agony crushed her body in a single second. Her hips sank onto her ankles, her hands slammed against the wet ground to brace herself, and her breath came in ragged, desperate gasps. She crumbled entirely. Thank God Ethan had walked away and hadn't seen how miserable she looked right now. No, even if he were here, it wouldn't matter. He wouldn't care, and she shouldn't care about his opinion either. It took a long time for her breathing to level out. Just then, her phone rang loudly from her bag, a frantic, high-pitched ring. She unzipped her bag and pulled out the phone. It was the hospital. Her heart skipped a beat. Over the past 3 months, a call from the hospital was the thing she feared most in the world. "Hello. Audrey. Where the hell are you? Your daughter is going into shock. Get over here right now. What? You're usually here every single night watching over her. Why aren't you here today? We just issued a critical condition notice. Get to the hospital within 5 minutes. Beep, beep. The caller hung up immediately, her tone laced with extreme urgency. Audrey's mind went completely blank. The world spun wildly around her. 5 seconds later, she scrambled to her feet, her face drained of all color. However, Miss Audrey, Mr. Ethan gave strict orders. You can't leave. Hashtag, hashtag, hashtag Chapter 5, Emergency. Outside the cemetery. Rain washed down through the treetops, dulling the streetlights to a hazy glow. A man stood beneath a tree, smoking. The lit tip of his cigarette burned like a single red ember hidden from the rain. In the dark blue night, his tall frame blended into the shadows, concealing his wild arrogance. He lifted the cigarette to take another drag just as a stray raindrop landed directly on the tip, instantly extinguishing it. Without a second of hesitation, he crumpled the dead cigarette in his palm, grinding it to pieces with force. The dark ash spilled into the rain, washed completely clean within seconds. His phone rang. It was the bodyguard inside. Inside the cemetery. Miss Audrey, Mr. Ethan gave strict orders. You are not allowed to leave. Audrey couldn't care less about what the bodyguard was saying. She had to get out. She bolted toward the exit, but how could a weakened woman match the brute strength of a hulking bodyguard? She barely took 2 steps before she was yanked right back. Sorry, ma'am. You can't leave. She didn't have time to reason with them. Where is Ethan? Her raspy voice cut through the rain, heavy and desperate. The terrible state of her voice stood in stark contrast to her delicate, beautiful face, especially her eyes, which were now bloodshot, framed by long, elegant lashes. We don't know, the guard replied mechanically. Take me to him. Sorry, we can't. The tension inside Audrey snapped. She couldn't care about anything else and threw herself forward again. But this time, she didn't even get a foot away. The guard grabbed her by the sleeve and hurled her straight toward the tombstone. Yes, hurled her. Her body was already stiff from the cold, and the impact left her feeling as though 4 of her 7 souls had been knocked right out of her frame. For a moment, her mind and body went completely numb. When she finally regained her senses, she heard a voice from behind her. Boss, she's trying to run. He was on the phone with Ethan. Audrey shot up like a bullet, snatched the phone from the bodyguard's hand, and heard Ethan's cold, unyielding voice over the line. Keep her right there. She doesn't step a foot out of that place. Ethan. The name Ethan was burned into the deepest corners of her heart. She had cried it out countless times in her dreams, in her daily life, and during those innumerable nights when they lay wrapped in each other's arms. Her entire youth had been stamped with his name. But never had she called him like this, with a raspy voice dripping with sheer desperation. I need to leave. To do what? He countered instantly. You don't need to know. Then you stay on your knees. Beep, beep. He hung up without another word. Audrey's body screamed at her to move. She had to get out, she must leave. Just as she was about to redial the number, the bodyguard snatched the phone back. Miss, I'm sorry, the bodyguard said, his voice cold and unfeeling. Don't worry, I'll keep an eye on you and I'll keep you safe. After all, it was a cemetery at night. Wandering spirits were a common fear. Audrey felt like 1,000 ants were crawling over her heart. She needed to get back. She had to get back. Right then, the phone rang again. It was the hospital. A jagged bolt of lightning flashed across the sky, followed by a deafening roar of thunder, boom, making her heart hammer violently against her ribs. She picked up the call and pressed the phone to her ear, but didn't dare speak. She was terrified that the sound of her own voice would destroy the tiny shred of composure she had left. How close are you? Why aren't you here tonight? Why weren't you watching over her? The charge nurse's tone wasn't frantic like the previous callers, it was unnaturally calm. But that calmness didn't comfort Audrey at all. Instead, it stretched her terror to a breaking point. Did something happen? Her vision went black. Hashtag, hashtag, hashtag Chapter 6, tell Ethan to get over here. The rain fell in unpredictable bursts. Her clothes, her purse, and her phone were completely soaked through. Water had seeped into the device, and a moment later, the screen went black as it shut off automatically. A sudden clarity hit her. Her body was stiff. Ever since giving birth, she had become increasingly sensitive to the cold, but it was precisely this biting chill that kept her grounded, reinforcing her fierce determination to leave. She owed Monique her life, and she was willing to give it up if needed, but under no circumstances would she let her daughter pay that debt. Monique's grave was located in downtown Northport. Getting back to Lindale County would take at least 3 hours, but she was going to make the journey regardless. Even if her daughter had passed away, she had to rush back to see her one last time, to hold her, kiss her, and stay by her side. In the 3 months since her birth, her baby had never once tasted her mother's milk, nor had Audrey ever been allowed to hold her. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small utility knife. It was a tool she used to peel fruit during the brief breaks in her hectic schedule. Working at the station was exhausting. She often skipped meals because she needed to earn money to raise her daughter. Her eyes were bloodshot yet eerily calm as she pointed the blade directly at Monique's eyes in the photograph. Those eyes were what Ethan had loved most, always smiling, filled with endless gentleness. She pressed the blade down firmly, leaving a deep scratch across the photo. "Tell Ethan to get over here. Otherwise, I'm digging up her grave." The lower her voice was, the firmer her resolve. She was sorry to Monique, and she would go to hell to atone for her sins later. But right now, she was going to the hospital to see her daughter, and no one was going to stop her. "Ma'am, have you lost your mind?" "Mr. Ethan." Schlick. The blade scraped violently against the tombstone, sending a shower of bright sparks flying through the dark, rainy night. "Call him over," she repeated. Her voice was raspy and terrible, yet hit with absolute steel. The 2 bodyguards went quiet. One of them turned and hurried out. He cared about Monique after all. Even in death, he cared. In less than 5 minutes, he arrived, bringing a wave of biting cold air as he stepped up beside her. Ethan's gaze landed on the tombstone. In the photograph, the woman's face had been slashed, and one of her eyes was completely ruined. He remained impassive. "I can come back another day, but right now I am leaving," Audrey said, forcing herself to stand. Having kneeled for so long, her legs were completely numb, and she stumbled the moment she stood up. She didn't fall. He caught her by the shoulder. His broad palm clamped down over her shoulder blade so hard she felt as though her bones were about to shatter. It hurt. "And if I don't let you leave? You'll really dig up her grave." She remained silent, the pain sealing her lips shut. He finally let go, sliding his hand up to slap her cheek lightly twice, tap, tap. It wasn't a hard blow, but the humiliation cut deep into her flesh and bone. "Do you want to dig it up on your knees, or standing up?" "Ethan." Audrey's raspy voice held a deeper layer of desperation now. She knew she couldn't go head-to-head with him. He had never been afraid of a fight. "I said I can come back another day. I want you here today. I have an emergency." "What, is someone going to die if you don't show up?" "Die." Hearing that word sent a heavy boulder crashing down into her chest, knocking the breath right out of her. For so many days and nights, she had longed for him, thought of him, given him everything she had. Yet his gentleness had never once been bestowed upon her. He was the protagonist in her story, while she was nothing more than a side character in his. But if that was the case, why had he unbuttoned her clothes in the past? "Ethan, you absolute bastard." Her heart twisted in agony. What if someone really is going to die? His dark eyes were impossibly deep, radiating a terrifying coldness. "If you really plan on digging up her grave, drop to your knees and give me a few hard kowtows first. Then I'll consider whether I'll actually let someone die around you." All of his tenderness, patience, and care had been exhausted on Monique. What was left was an empty shell without a heart. "You're going to regret this." 5 words, pushed out with every ounce of her strength. Chapter 7. Monique was married and older than him. The number of bodyguards increased from 2 to 4. She didn't know if they held her in too high regard. assuming two men weren't enough to keep a single woman in line. As time ticked by, the frantic anxiety crawling inside her heart slowly died down, giving way to a strange numbness. Everything was set in stone. Everything was fate. Ever since the day she met Ethan, her life had been a series of endless disasters. She should have died in that fire a year ago. Today was the anniversary of Monique's death and her daughter. A surge of grief threatened to break through her chest again, but subsided just as quickly. She needed to stay calm. This wasn't the first time she had received a critical condition notice. Her daughter was suffering so much, without a father, deprived of the warmth of a family. Perhaps leaving this world was a form of mercy. In the pouring rain, soaked to the skin, she still felt her eyes burning with a dry, sharp ache. Her consciousness began to drift, her body completely exhausted, as she slowly slipped into a dreamscape. To 20-year-olds, romantic love possessed a dangerous magic. It could make the blood in your veins boil for the sake of a faint, foolish crush, driving you to do anything, making you act pathetic without even realizing it. Back then, Ethan was a local legend, a street punk who had worked his way up to a gang leader. He had a crew of loyal followers who respected him blindly. Good-looking, tall, and broad-shouldered, he was the heir to the wealthy Ethan family. That fact alone was enough to attract countless women, and Audrey was one of them. Yet he treated all of them with utter disdain, Audrey included. But she was the most stubborn of the bunch. To get close to him, she befriended his crew, bribing them with treats so they would call her sister-in-law whenever Ethan was around. At first, he ignored it, not because he approved, but because he couldn't be bothered to care. Back then, she had secretly gloated, foolishly believing he was okay with his guys calling her his girl. Until one day, Ethan knocked out the front teeth of the guy who called her sister-in-law because she had arrived. Monique. An extraordinarily gentle, elegant woman. Her charm didn't need any exaggeration. It oozed from her very bones, an effortless, intoxicating grace. She was 3 years older than Ethan and 7 years older than Audrey. Audrey had once believed that because she was young, lively, and had known Ethan longer than Monique had, Ethan would inevitably fall for her. She was dead wrong. Even later, when Monique married another man, and Audrey finally got to be with Ethan, the moment Monique returned, everything reverted right back to square one. "I love Ethan. I'll take your pain for you, just leave him." The words Monique had cried out as she threw herself over Audrey during the fire still echoed loudly in her ears, making her heart hammer against her ribs. Audrey snapped her eyes open, realizing it had all been a dream, a memory of the 10 chaotic years she and Ethan had spent tangled together, from age 18 to 28. The rain had stopped, and her clothes had been warmed dry by her own body heat. The vehicle was speeding down the road under the breaking dawn. The night had finally come to an end. They were heading toward Lindale County. Once they arrived, what would happen? How would her daughter be? "Take me to Lindale County Hospital," she said. Her voice was weak, raspy, and terribly broken. She knew she was running a high fever, and she knew she must look like an absolute mess. "Sister Audrey," the driver called out, glancing back. Audrey finally saw his face. She remembered every single person around Ethan clearly. This was the guy who had called her sister-in-law back in the day and had his teeth knocked out for it, Ralph. Once a skinny kid, he now had thick muscles wrapping his arms. Something caught in her throat, rendering her unable to speak a single word. #### Chapter 8. The baby is stable for now. Ethan had plenty of friends, and all of them knew about her history with him. 10 years had passed, and everyone had changed, growing from naive teenagers into mature adults, their sharp edges long since smoothed over by life. Everyone except Ethan. His edges had only grown sharper, deadlier. Ralph pulled out a tissue and handed it over. "Sister Audrey, what happened to you? You used to have the sweetest voice. You were a famous radio host. How did you end up?" Ralph had only recently returned to town and reconnected with Ethan, so he was completely out of the loop regarding what had transpired over the past year. At his question, Audrey almost lost control of her grief. But it was only almost. Just drive to the hospital. I have an emergency, she forced out with great difficulty. All right, we'll catch up later. Man, I don't know what's going on. When I found you at the cemetery, I was shocked. Sister Monique, how did she die again? And why were you passed out over there? Why is Ethan treating you like this? Ralph babbled on. Audrey felt a sharp, twisting agony in her gut, a deep, agonizing ache tied directly to her nerves, impossible to put into words. At the hospital. The moment the vehicle pulled over, Audrey bolted. She ran all the way from the parking lot straight to the ward in one breathless burst. The exertion finally brought a flush of color back to her pale face. As she reached the corridor, she ran right into the charge nurse. Audrey grabbed her arm, desperate to speak. The nurse looked at Audrey's ghostly face and reached out to touch her forehead, but before she could ask anything, Audrey gripped her hand tight. She couldn't make a sound. Her throat was completely blocked. "Where have you been?" the nurse asked. Audrey shook her head. Her throat felt like it was on fire. She tried to open her mouth, but nothing came out, her eyes red and frantic. The nurse didn't press further. She pulled her hand back and led Audrey into her office. "Here are the consent forms and paperwork from yesterday's emergency surgery. I signed your name for you." "Audrey, I'm a medical professional. I am not allowed to do this." "I had to beg the department head to allow it. The surgery was a success, and she's currently in the ICU receiving critical care. As for whether she's completely out of the woods, it's hard to say." Audrey suddenly burst into a violent coughing fit, hacking so hard a dark clot of phlegm came up. She lost all her strength, leaning heavily against the desk, gasping for air. The surgery was a success. Her daughter was so brave. 3 critical condition notices, and she had pulled through every single one. "What on earth have you been doing to yourself?" The nurse gasped in surprise, then let out a heavy sigh, pulling out an itemized bill. "Your account is overdrawn. Go clean yourself up, register at the clinic, and pay the fees when you're ready." Audrey glanced down at the statement, $8,500, and that was just the unpaid balance. Her heart felt as though it had been tied to a massive rock, sinking straight to the bottom of the ocean. Thank God the surgery had been a success and nothing catastrophic had happened. A miracle amid disaster. Visitors weren't allowed in the ICU at the moment, so she decided to go home. Before leaving, she settled what she could of the bill. After the transaction, a notification flashed on her phone screen. Her remaining account balance was $75, barely enough for half a day of treatment. When she left, she deliberately avoided Ralph. She had run upstairs in such a hurry earlier that Ralph hadn't been able to keep track of where she went. That was for the best. She didn't want him asking unnecessary questions. She went home, showered, changed into fresh clothes, and took her medicine. She was running on pure exhaustion, so instead of driving, she hailed a cab to the station. She had to work. In the back of the cab, her weakened body gave out, and she drifted off for a bit. By the time she reached her department at the radio station, everyone was talking about how impressive she was. Word had it that Reggie had praised her in front of the entire team, claiming she had successfully landed a major client, which was why he'd granted her a half-day off. They were all surprised to see her show up for work. Audrey remained silent. "So, the deal was actually done? Where's the manager?" "In his office, with the client." "Ethan? He came here?" Hashtag chapter 9, hellbent on blocking her path. Just as the thought crossed Audrey's mind, the office door swung open. Reggie looked like an absolute brown-noser, his face plastered with a groveling smile as he held the door open for the man behind him. The moment he stepped out, an audible gasp swept through the room. In the dappled light, Ethan's face grew increasingly clear, sharp, impossibly handsome features, his brow carrying that distinct, arrogant flair, wearing a crisp, snow-white shirt. Perhaps the fever hadn't fully broken, causing her vision to blur. For a split second, she felt as though she had been transported back to the afternoon he first undressed her. He had been dressed just like this, a snow-white shirt, cropped hair, his every breath driving her wild. Fully clothed, he looked like a refined gentleman. Stripped down, he was an untamed beast. Her gaze focused, and his face appeared right in front of her, inches away. Her heart took a violent leap. The corner of his lips twitched slightly. To an outsider, it looked like a pleasant smile, but standing face to face with him, Audrey saw only cruel mockery. Because of her daughter, she harbored a deep, bitter resentment toward Ethan. Words of fury surged from the depths of her heart, only to run smack into her $8,500 medical bill. She changed her mind. She needed money. She was willing to earn money from anyone, including Ethan. Manager Reggie, Ethan spoke, his eyes fixed on Audrey. Yes, Mr. Ethan, sir. This lady has an unbearable temper. She loves going against me and backtalking. I really don't like it. The sharp glint in the corner of his eye flickered dangerously. Audrey's heart sank. What is he trying to do now? Then what do you mean? Reggie thought to himself, she spent the entire night with you. What more do you want? Ethan cast a cool side glance. Are you dense? Got it. Reggie didn't dare pretend otherwise. Ethan looked at Audrey, the amusement fading from his eyes like a tiger getting ready to tear into a lamb, giving its prey one final warning before the feast. Audrey felt a cold dread wash over her. He was hell-bent on blocking every path she had left. Why? Because she had resisted when he tried to force her to pay respects to Monique last night? Reggie escorted Ethan out of the building and into the parking lot. Mr. Ethan, if Miss Audrey did anything to displease you last night, please forgive her. That woman is completely unmanageable and weird as hell. I'll fire her the moment I get back and tell her to pack her shit. Reggie babbled on endlessly. Ethan stopped dead in his tracks. Manager Reggie. The flat tone instantly cut Reggie off. Reggie's groveling smile clicked back into place. Yes, Mr. Ethan? How many times has your company offered special accommodations? Huh? Just this once, sir. A client casually brings it up and you just agree? Wait, what does that mean? How is it casual? He mentions it and you hand a woman over on a silver platter? Are your employees really that worthless to you? What? Reggie was completely baffled. You were the one who asked for it. You were the one who enjoyed it. Now, are you trying to settle scores with me? Ethan cracked his neck, the joints popping sharply. He rolled his wrist, his expression eerily calm. Yet those popping sounds conveyed two clear words, run away. Reggie had no clue, staring at him like an idiot. Until Ethan's fist swung straight at his face. Bang! With a single punch, two of Reggie's front teeth went flying. The blow came so fast and hard that Reggie didn't even register the pain for the first second. Show her some respect, Ethan said coolly. And don't you dare let anything like this happen again or else. The excruciating pain finally hit Reggie. He squatted down, clutching his bloody mouth, and let out a blood-curdling scream. Before Ethan could even finish his sentence, he looked down at the squealing man and murmured softly, "Shut up." The screaming stopped instantly. Ethan stood over him like a king staring down at a pathetic subject. #### Chapter 10, Selling the Car to Save the Baby. Gossip was flying through the office about what had gone down between Audrey and the client last night for him to come out today and say, "She has a bad temper. I don't like her." Audrey had only been working at the station for 2 months as a junior assistant. The more polite coworkers avoided discussing it in front of her, but a few didn't care about her feelings at all, gossiping openly within earshot. Audrey's mind was entirely consumed by money. She didn't have the energy to care about their petty talk. She only had $75 left in her account, and she had no idea how many days her recent payment would cover. She reached out to a friend to put her car up for sale. She had bought the vehicle when she returned home last year, registering it under her mother's name. Her mother was a deeply traditional woman, so traditional it bordered on cruel. When she found out Audrey was pregnant out of wedlock, she had kicked her out of the house. Audrey had left with nothing, taking only that car. If she sold it now, She'd likely have to endure a storm of verbal abuse and cold shoulder treatment from her mother later on. Reggie didn't return until late afternoon, wearing a thick mask over a face that was completely swollen. He stormed into the building and called Audrey into his office immediately. Slam. He slammed his palm onto the desk. Audrey looked at him calmly. She could endure any storm at this point. She was just waiting to see if he was going to fire her. You. Reggie clutched his face, pointing a trembling finger at her. He uttered one word before wincing in agony from the movement. After a long moment, he spat out, "What the fuck are you doing? Where do you get off bringing that nasty attitude of yours around clients? I'm telling you, if he hadn't taken that punch to the face earlier, he would have thrown this bitch out on her ass." He grabbed the contract and slapped it against her chest. "Get out there and close this deal. If you don't even think about getting paid this month. And whatever he says, you do. If he tells you to crawl, you crawl. If he tells you to kneel, you kneel. You came to work to make money, so stop walking around with that stone face. If a guy like him takes a liking to you, it's your damn luck. With that ruined voice of yours, what other man is ever going to want you?" So he wasn't going to fire her after all. Audrey's patience finally snapped. "If I close this deal, what's my cut? You still want to cut. You. Otherwise, what am I doing this for? Didn't I come to work to make money? Am I pleasing him just so I can come back and look at your swollen pig face? Audrey, you. Show some respect. Mr. Ethan has endless money. If I go out of my way to please him, aren't you afraid I'll use this deal as leverage to make him get your ass fired?" It wasn't unheard of. A low-level manager like Reggie could easily be replaced by dozens of candidates the moment he walked out the door. The station executives weren't stupid. They knew what kind of scum Reggie was. Trading him for a multi-million-dollar contract was a steal. Reggie's chest heaved with fury, but remembering his 2 missing teeth and the massive bonus on the line, he swallowed his rage. "How much commission do you want? Name it. I'll get him to sign a 5-year advertising contract, tripling the original budget. I'm sure that price point will rank near the top across all local networks. Just give me $25,000. I believe once I close this, your own bonus will be far higher than that number." Last year, Reggie's year-end bonus had been $80,000. If Ethan's contract went through, Reggie would likely pull in a similar amount. Asking for $25,000 left the station with plenty of profit. Besides, employee bonuses in this department were ultimately approved by Reggie anyway. Reggie agreed. Audrey caught on to the underlying dynamic. Her appearance last night had probably given Reggie the impression that she stood a chance with Ethan. The fact that he hadn't fired her was a surprise in itself. Even after she insulted him to his face, he still kept her on. It seemed Ethan really was a prized catch. Having money really was everything. In that case, she was going to claim her share. Hashtag chapter 11, returning to old haunts. Since she wanted to make money, she needed to set everything else aside and view him strictly as a business partner. Earning money was earning money, no matter whose pocket it came from. After work, she ran into Ralph outside the station building. "Sister Audrey, I've been waiting for you for ages. I knew you'd be here." After all, she used to be a famous radio host in Northport. That was her profession. Even if her voice was ruined, she could still work behind the scenes. She offered a polite, faint smile. "Where is he?" Even though she dreaded seeing him, she had to do it for the contract. "Who?" "Ethan." "Oh, Ethan?" He left. He headed back to Northport. Since Reggie's entire focus was now on Ethan, he ordered Audrey to follow him to Northport immediately, telling her not to delay. Audrey still had her baby to worry about. She asked Ralph to buy her some cold medicine, using the excuse to send him away temporarily. She rushed to the hospital. Her daughter was still in the ICU. Because Audrey had a cold, she wasn't allowed inside the ward. She spoke with the doctor instead. The charge nurse had known her for 3 months now and understood her situation quite well. It was fine for her to travel for work, but someone had to watch over the baby. To secure that $25,000, she needed to hire a private nurse. Audrey wasn't very familiar with the county, so the charge nurse helped her hire a trustworthy middle-aged woman for $700 a month. The nurse called the woman over on the spot. Audrey met her, saw that she looked kind and reliable, and handed her $850, maxing out a credit card, just asking her to take good care of her child while she was away. She maxed out another $5,000 on her credit card to cover the immediate medical fees. At this point, she was utterly penniless. Before having the baby, after buying the car, she still had tens of thousands in savings. Now, by the time she returned home, it was late into the night. Her fever spiked again, and all she wanted was a good night's sleep. She dragged her exhausted body around to pack her essentials, reconnected with Ralph, and set off for Northport. When Ralph pressed her about where she had been, she simply lied and said she had urgent work at the station. Then she collapsed onto the back seat and drifted into a feverish sleep. The hotel. It was the same city she had been in just last night, where it had been raining heavily. Today, the sun was shining bright, erasing every trace of last night's downpour. Arriving at the familiar hotel, she spent another sleepless night, her mind flooded with unstoppable memories of the past. Her body was in terrible shape, the fever fluctuating repeatedly. She didn't fall asleep until right before dawn. When she woke up, it was 2 in the afternoon. She gasped in surprise. She had actually slept for that long. It had been forever since she allowed herself such a luxury. She scrambled out of bed, cleaned herself up, and headed downstairs. Calling the hospital, she learned that her daughter still hadn't been transferred to a general ward. Her vitals remained stable, showing neither improvement nor deterioration. Reaching the lobby, she saw hotel staff bustling about, setting up venue decor for an upcoming event. She cast a brief glance over them and walked to the front desk to ask the clerk to call a cab for her. "Ma'am, we're hosting a charity auction tonight," the clerk said politely. "Since you checked in yesterday, we'd be happy to offer you a complimentary invitation." An auction held zero interest for her. Turning her head, she caught sight of a promotional display featuring the key figures attending tonight's event. In other words, the ultra-wealthy. One face immediately stood out in the front row, dressed in a sharp suit, radiating the quiet authority of an elite executive. Even in a photo, his buzz cut gave off an unmistakable, arrogant flair, blended with an inimitable, dangerous charm. #### Chapter 12. How pathetic can one be? At 6:30 p.m. sharp, the auction commenced. Audrey was the very last person to slip into the hall. Having been a well-known radio host, she had rubbed shoulders with her fair share of prominent figures, and she had no desire to exchange hollow pleasantries with anyone tonight. Reggie's sharp words echoed in her mind. "With that ruined voice of yours, what other man is ever going to want you?" She certainly didn't expect anyone to like her, but she still hadn't learned to make peace with her voice. She was still terrified. Holding her invitation, she slipped into a seat in the back corner. The last row was dimly lit, elevated by 2 steps to offer a clear view of the stage. Her eyes scanned the room, but she didn't see him anywhere. A man like Ethan was utterly unpredictable. If the world was a massive cage of rules and expectations, he was the kind of man who stood right on top of it. A gala like this was never a guarantee for him. If he didn't show up, she would simply leave. Just as she was about to push herself up, someone walked in. She turned her head, catching sight of a tall, imposing figure stepping through the shifting lights. He had arrived. Audrey instantly retracted her gaze, not daring and unwilling to linger on him for another second. He was both an elite heir and an urban legend, perfectly comfortable under the gaze of thousands. Surrounded by watchful eyes, he strode to his reserved seat in the front row and sat down. From her angle, she could see the sharp, sculpted line of his profile. Audrey didn't care about what was being auctioned on stage, nor was she in the mood to pay attention. Whenever Ethan was near, her mind would spiral, dragging up endless thoughts of the past and of everything that had happened recently. How pathetic can a person be? At some point, the items on display shifted from fine jewelry and rare paintings to a lakefront villa and a custom blue Mustang. Audrey snapped out of her stupor instantly, feeling as though thousands of needles were piercing her body all at once. It was a sharp, throbbing ache radiating from deep within, yet she couldn't allow a single trace of it to show on her face. Ethan had given her that house and that car when they were together. She had personally decorated every inch of that villa. Back then, he had called her a free spirit who didn't care for dainty things, making a sporty Mustang the perfect match for her. "Is this color a bit too flashy?" she had asked back then, her voice sweet and full of life. "Won't I look a little too arrogant driving this around?" "Let them talk," he had replied with a smirk. "If anyone has a problem with it, tell 'em to come to me, and I'll show 'em what real flashy looks like." That line had set off a burst of giggles from her. Unable to take her silly laugh anymore, he had yanked her into his chest, smothering her laughter with his lips. That house held so many memories of their time together, their wild passion, the quiet, mundane details of their shared life. He hadn't even bothered selling it privately. Instead, he chose this high-profile manner to publicly dispose of the things he had once gifted her. The seller of this lakefront property and the Mustang left a note, the auctioneer announced smoothly. He stated that these items deserve a more suitable owner. The opening bid surprised even me, a seasoned auctioneer. The villa and vehicle are being bundled together, starting at just $1,000. Those needles turned into sharp blades, plunging straight into her chest, making her breath catch in her throat. A more suitable owner? Am I not suitable? He was the one who said my personality was free-spirited, that this car was practically made for me. She had gotten it wrong. This method wasn't just high-profile, it was insultingly cheap. She looked toward his direction. His jawline was sculpted to perfection, his masculinity radiating from the subtle flex of his back muscles beneath his suit. Bids began flying across the room. The car wasn't worth much on its own, but a prime lakefront villa was worth millions. Starting the bidding at $1,000 was practically giving it away for free. Suddenly, someone grabbed her hand and raised it, shouting, "This lady bids $500,000. Audrey gasped, whipping her head around. Chapter 13, holding hands just to provoke? Time blurred, memories coming alive in her mind like vivid snapshots, breaking free before age had the chance to fade them. The person she longed to see never appeared, while the ones she wished to avoid kept showing up one after another. Audrey hadn't even noticed when he sat down beside her. In the dim light, his mature, striking face appeared right in front of her. For a moment, she had no idea how to react. She stared blankly at him, Brian, her childhood neighbor, her longtime friend, and a third wheel in her tumultuous history with Ethan. $600,000, someone called out. $800,000, Brian raised her hand again, calling out the bid smoothly. $1 million. $1,500,000, he spoke again, his voice dropping heavy and clear. The price was climbing fast, backed by a ruthless determination to win. Every head in the room turned toward them, including Ethan's. As the crowd turned, Audrey reflexively looked toward the front row as well. But in that exact second, a sharp pain shot through her wrist, making her heart clench violently. She whipped her gaze back to Brian. His hazel eyes bore into hers with intense pressure, making her throat tighten. Among the crowd, Ethan was the first to turn his head back, casting only a single, fleeting glance in their direction. A stray beam of light caught his eyes, resembling a cold blade plunging into an icy pond, sharp and chilling. His long, slender fingers tapped once against the table to his right, a faint sound audible only to the assistant beside him. $2 million, his assistant spoke up immediately. Ethan remained still, staring straight ahead, his composed executive demeanor carrying a fierce, dangerous edge. Silence fell over the room. $2,500,000. For $1 million. The two men seemed locked in a quiet battle, both determined to secure the property. The price jumped by a massive $1.5 million in a single breath, treating millions like pocket change. No one else spoke up. The rest of the bidders withdrew completely. A heavy silence settled over the room. The auctioneer began the countdown. If no one raised the bid within seconds, the property would be sold. Do you want it? Brian leaned close to Audrey's ear, his voice low. Throughout the entire exchange, he hadn't let go of her hand for a single second. The more she struggled, the tighter his grip became, sending spikes of pain up her arm. He knew it hurt her, but he didn't care. The house Ethan had gifted her was now being auctioned off by Ethan himself. What was the point of holding on to it? Broken things, broken feelings, a broken man. No. Before she could finish her sentence, Brian's voice cut across the room. $5 million. 3 words, heavy and absolute. Audrey was speechless. Ethan's assistant opened his mouth to raise the bid again, but before he could utter a word, Ethan flicked his finger slightly. The assistant clamped his mouth shut instantly. The final hammer fell at $5 million. The villa and the Mustang belonged to Brian. The auction concluded. As the guests filed out, the 4 of them remained behind as if by unspoken agreement: Brian, Audrey, Ethan, and his assistant. The previous bidder had already departed. In this silent confrontation, before a single word was uttered, tension crackled thickly in the air. Mr. Ethan, Brian spoke first, his grip still firm around Audrey's hand. The moment Audrey found herself face to face with Ethan, she gave up struggling entirely. She stood by Brian's side, letting him hold her hand. Ethan stood with his hands casually stuffed into his pant pockets, the wild arrogance beneath his tailored suit practically bleeding through. Spending $5 million just to come find me? You could say that. A faint, cold smile flickered across Ethan's lips. Then what's with the hand-holding? Trying to provoke me? #, chapter 14. I can't quit women. Audrey felt her heart couldn't possibly take another blow. After all, she had already endured the absolute worst life had to offer. Ethan's tone and expression were just like that tiny boat from her past, bumping its sharp edges against her heart once more. It was nothing she couldn't handle. Brian let out a faint, unreadable laugh. Why would I bother provoking a married man? In other words, what right do you even have? A married man. That was the stamp burned onto Ethan's identity and the sore spot in Audrey's heart. He was married. Ethan smiled, revealing a row of neat, white teeth. His relaxed composure didn't shift, but the sharpness in his eyes intensified. Well, since you threw down $5 million, I'll let you win the verbal sparring. As for her, he gestured toward Audrey with a slight tilt of his chin. You'd better let go of her hand. That tilt of his chin carried immense meaning. Ethan knew exactly why she had returned. If not for her job, if not for the money, she would never set foot in this city again. Audrey's heart shuddered. Right now, to save her daughter, she would give up her very life if it meant keeping her baby healthy. Letting go of a hand was nothing in comparison. She pulled her hand back, but Brian instantly tightened his grip, pulling her closer. He exerted force through his fingers while maintaining a calm smile on his face. Do you like the house and the car? They're yours. Was now really the time for this? And she hated that house and that car, hated them. No need. Why not? Ethan interrupted smoothly. Having someone gift you a house and a car is a blessing. Mr. Brian is being generous, accept it. This was his second instruction. Audrey took a sharp breath, staring at him. Every breath felt laced with fine needles, carving a single name into her heart over and over again. Ethan. Did he really not know what that house and car meant to her? Or did he simply not care about her feelings at all? Expecting her to accept property he had cast aside, bought by another man at an auction? They had only been broken up for a year. She could force herself to rationalize all of Ethan's cruel behavior, but what she couldn't handle was how a single action or expression from him could still sway her so completely. She turned her head to look at Brian, nodding slightly. All right then. Thank you. The faint, mocking smile in Brian's eyes slowly faded under Audrey's quiet gaze. It turned into coldness and finally, burning anger. He was furious that Audrey was actually listening to Ethan. You really love playing the pathetic fool, don't you? You haven't changed a bit after all these years. He released her hand abruptly and turned to leave. Playing the pathetic fool? Audrey supposed she really was. In the past, she had played the fool for Ethan more times than she could count. A tall shadow fell over her. Looking up, she found him standing right in front of her, dressed in his snow-white shirt, looking down at her condescendingly. She took a step back. He offered no reaction to her movement. "Are you still in touch with Brian? Does it have anything to do with you?" As the raspy words left her throat, she realized how terrible she sounded. Her ruined voice made the question sound almost like a desperate hope, as if she were begging him to say, "Yes, it does. Somewhat, I suppose." "Huh. After all, I really dislike the guy. As for you." He paused. Audrey felt a sudden wave of tension wash over her, though she couldn't explain why. Perhaps her reaction was too obvious, prompting a deep, unreadable smile to touch his lips. Gazing into her eyes, his thin lips curved slightly. Women really are the one thing in this world a man can never quit. He read it clearly in her eyes. She still cared. No, she still loved him. The one who was loved always held the upper hand. A man, a creature driven by primal desires, would never turn down a woman whose mind was entirely consumed by him, even if he already had a family waiting at home. ####Chapter 15. He was standing a yard away. Stepping out of the auction room, Audrey felt a loud buzzing in her ears, as if something were roaring past her. She knew it was the weight of Ethan's presence lingering in her mind. She went to the restroom and splashed cold water onto her face. Looking at her reflection in the mirror, the pale, sickly complexion, the raw emotions laid bare across her features, she realized she was practically begging to be mocked. Huh. She let out a self-deprecating laugh. Yet right now, she still had to maintain contact with him. She had to secure this advertising contract at the best possible rate. That $25,000 commission could be her daughter's lifeline. Her phone buzzed. Seeing the Lindale County caller ID, panic immediately seized her. She was terrified of incoming calls. She was terrified it was news about her child. Over the past 3 months, she hadn't received a single piece of good news regarding her daughter's health. "Hello. It's me." A familiar voice made her sigh in relief. She leaned against the cold wall, gasping for air. It was her friend Florence. She had changed her number. "Someone's willing to buy your car for $7,000. What do you think?" "I paid $25,000 in cash for it last year, and it's only been a year with barely 2,000 miles on it. Isn't $7,000 a bit ridiculous?" She desperately needed money, but she wasn't stupid. "All right, I'll try to negotiate further. I'm not asking for an unreasonable price. The official appraisal will be out soon, and it's definitely going to be valued over $14,000. I'm willing to sell cheap because I desperately need cash, but I can't let it go for anything under $14,000. She discussed a few more details with Florence before her friend added softly, "Audrey, I was just wondering, is there any chance your voice can be treated? To be honest, sometimes I'm almost scared to call you." It sounded terrifying. A sharp pain pierced Audrey's chest. She used to be a famous radio host, and ending up like this hurt her more than anyone else. There had been a golden window for treatment, but she had missed it. Back then, she had just broken up with Ethan and simultaneously discovered she was pregnant. Overwhelmed by grief, she had abandoned all self-care. Though she took medication later on, the optimal window had passed. And then, her daughter was born prematurely, and Audrey spent 10 days in the ICU. Her condition worsened, and her voice deteriorated into this horrific state. At that point, her sole focus was saving her child. She had neither the energy nor the money to worry about herself. Whether it could ever be cured was unknown. But she knew one thing for certain: it would never return to what it used to be. Florence's words cut right to the quick. "Let's stick to text messages from now on then." "I'm so sorry, Audrey. I didn't mean anything bad by it." Audrey offered a faint, hollow smile. "It's fine." She hung up the call. That love story had stripped away almost everything she owned, leaving behind only this broken physical shell. Still, it was better than Monique's fate. At least Monique was dead. Taking a deep breath, she dialed Ethan's number, walking toward the exit as it rang. "Mr. Ethan," she addressed him. She had never spoken to him with such distant politeness. Never. Talk. A single, impatient syllable. Are you free tonight? How about I buy you dinner? She forced out words that made her sick to her stomach. Sure. Your place or mine? She could practically hear the mock in his tone. Combined with what he had said in the auction room earlier, the words felt like a knife twisting in her heart. A wave of intense humiliation washed over her. She hung up the phone abruptly, unable to control her ragged breathing. Biting her lip, her heart hammered wildly in her chest. She wished she could stab him and then stab herself twice. 5 seconds later, she raised her head and looked to her right. He was standing right there, just a yard away from her, looking impossibly refined and dangerously attractive. He seemed to appear out of nowhere, his sharp, intimidating presence completely enveloping her fragile, pathetic state. #### Chapter 16. What is shame? Having taken her medicine and slept for so long, a burning heat surged through her body once more, leaving her legs feeling weak and unstable. She didn't want to see Ethan. Every time she faced him, she felt as though he were grinding her heart under his heel. Yet he represented her $25,000 commission. She was in desperate need of money. What did shame even matter? What did her own feelings count for? She straightened her back, looking at him as a gentle, polite smile touched her pale lips. Mr. Ethan. The formal title felt like a sharp blade slicing through her heart. Ethan stood with his hands in his pockets, his dark eyes narrowing subtly. Before she could speak again, he cut in, Have you learned how to swim yet? What? Oh, she remembered now. She hadn't known how to swim back then, and he had been the one to teach her. In that very house he had just auctioned off. She had eventually learned, but she used to pretend she still didn't know just so he would teach her step by step. Her lips moved, but in the end, she said nothing. Throw her in, he uttered those 3 words coldly, then turned and walked away. Audrey didn't understand. She was about to call out to him when Ralph, who had been standing behind him, stepped forward. Sister Audrey, let's go. She looked at him blankly. Go where? Summer had just begun, but the air was far from warm, carrying a distinct chill. Not to mention, her fever was spiking again. The water in the pool was colder than normal room temperature, making her shiver the moment she stepped in. Sister Audrey, I'm really sorry about this, Ralph said from the edge. Ethan said you needed to disinfect in here for a bit. I didn't bring any actual disinfectant, so just soak for a little while and come up. Don't catch a cold. Audrey was speechless. Upstairs. Ethan stood by the window, looking down at the courtyard below. The pool water shimmered under the moonlight, sparkling like liquid silver. The 5th floor wasn't terribly high. While he couldn't make out her facial features clearly, he could see her slender form floating on the surface of the water. Lighting a cigarette, the gray night mist combined with the smoke to obscure his eyes. The room was dark, illuminated only by distant city lights that cast shifting shadows across the space. His tall, broad frame stood motionless, resembling a pine tree standing lone and proud in a bleak winter landscape. The shadows surrounding him buried his cold arrogance and sharp edges. Half an hour later, she arrived. Before entering the room, Audrey slapped her cheeks lightly, trying her best to bring some color back to her pale face. Stepping inside, she saw him sitting on the sofa, flipping through a magazine. He was the kind of man who would stand out even in a crowd of beggars, the type who could make people beg to serve him, blending dangerous authority with raw male magnetism effortlessly. Ethan, I brought Sister Audrey up for you, Ralph announced cheerfully. Ethan lifted his head, casting an ice-cold glare at him. Ralph shrank back slightly. What? You booked a room, aren't you, and Sister Audrey gonna do that? Having followed Ethan since childhood, Ralph wasn't actually afraid of him. The magazine flew through the air, hitting Ralph square in the chest. Say one more word, and I'll gouge your eyes out. Usually when people talk too much, you threaten to rip their mouth off, don't you? TSK. A sound like a predator sharpening its teeth filled the quiet room. Ralph took a step back, grinning awkwardly. I'll take my leave then. He turned around, giving Audrey a subtle, fighting gesture before slipping out. Audrey stood frozen. Did this kid really have no idea what had transpired between her and Ethan over the past year? Otherwise, how could he make jokes like that? The sound of the door closing coincided almost perfectly with Ethan's voice. "Come here." Closer. She obeyed without hesitation, walking over and sitting down on the sofa barely a yard away from him. She desperately needed to sit. Her legs were about to give out. #### chapter 17. Did you expect me to keep them? Perhaps she had sat down a bit too decisively, causing Ethan to turn his head and appraise her. His dark pupils caught the ambient light, filled with intense scrutiny. He was entirely confident because he knew she loved him. Audrey's body felt like it was on fire, leaving her so weak she didn't even want to speak, yet she had to force the words out. "It's better to be direct, isn't it? I came here strictly for business." She pulled her gaze back, her eyes landing on the glass of water sitting on the table in front of him. Involuntarily, she licked her dry lips. She was parched. That tiny detail didn't escape the man's watchful eyes. He observed her impassively. 1 second, 2 seconds, 5 seconds, 8 seconds. Time was up. She forced herself to stand, stepping back to the far side of the coffee table to maintain a safe distance from him. My apologies. If she were treating him purely as a client, her abrupt sit-down had indeed been somewhat unprofessional. He picked up the glass of water, holding it a few inches from his eyes, tilting it gently. The light refracted through the liquid, looking like a ribbon of silk flowing near his lips. She desperately wanted to reach for it, yet couldn't. A phrase suddenly popped into her head, desperate for relief. He set the glass back down directly in front of him. From Audrey's perspective, she caught a faint, fleeting curve at the corner of his lips, but it vanished in an instant. Waves of heat rolled through her body, leaving her eyes burning red. All she wanted was to lie down. Today. He took a sip of water, holding it in his mouth so his cheeks puffed slightly, before swallowing it down. She watched his Adam's apple bob heavily. Her fingers curled into tight fists. "I don't feel like discussing business." Audrey frowned. "Mr. Ethan, if you really don't want to discuss business, then I'll stand right there. Don't move." He cut her off, his voice neither loud nor heavy, yet landing squarely on her heart like a heavy blow. She was ill. Sharp as he was, he could naturally tell she was, genuinely on the verge of collapsing. She lowered her head, taking a quiet breath before looking back up. Ethan. The name felt like a barbed rope being yanked from the depths of her heart. That heavy, tearing pain served as a constant reminder to stay calm and not panic, even if she was going to act foolishly. She shouldn't make it so effortless for him. "Where are my belongings?" Since he didn't want to talk business, she would ask a personal question instead. The house and car he gifted her had been auctioned off. As for all her personal belongings inside that house, when she left, she hadn't taken a single thing besides her identification documents. Burned. She said nothing. "Did you actually expect me to keep them for you?" "No." She wanted to sigh, but suppressed it, forcing a faint smile instead. "That's even better." Everything she had, every detail of their past, she had recorded over 1,000 photographs, mostly of him. When she loved him, she had loved with every fiber of her being so fiercely that the lingering warmth of that past love was still devouring her today. The photos were gone. That was for the best. "I came to negotiate with absolute sincerity, and I've accommodated your schedule in every way. Now, excuse me." Ethan didn't offer a reply. He had only taken a single sip from that glass of water. The glass surface reflected her fragile, trembling figure. Turning around, her hair swayed gently against her back. She took 2 steps before her knees buckled completely, sending her crashing to the floor. Bang! He didn't move an inch. Even the ripples in his water glass remained steady, as if her collapse had been entirely within his expectations. He sat on the sofa like a patient predator, quietly appraising its fallen prey. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. She lay curled up on the cold hardwood floor, her body shivering. Only after a long, drawn-out silence did he finally rise to his feet, walking over to her at a slow, deliberate pace.